everybody. So today, as Paul said, we're going to be covering some basic optimizations which you can simply do in the Beeswax platform. So quick introduction to myself. I'm Hannah Cooper. I'm a programmatic trader at Beeswax, part of the ProServe team. We help our clients hit their success metrics as quickly as possible. So the agenda today, we're going to cover a couple of quick wins, how to use creative weights, building out basic exclusion lists, and a couple of easy ways to use a bid modifier. And then we'll leave plenty of time at the end for some Q&A. So diving straight in, couple of quick wins. As you're all very aware, there's two main environments in programmatic. There's the app environment and the web environment. Our first recommendation here is to, when setting up campaigns, target these on separate line items. A couple of you are probably thinking now, why do this? And there are multiple reasons why it's beneficial to break them out. And these are a couple. So as I mentioned, they are both very different environments, and as a result, they drive very different performance, specifically clicks, and also conversions. So when tracking conversions in the app environment, you may need to integrate with an MMP, which is a mobile measurement platform. It's very easy to control the budgets, brand safety differs, and finally, contextual optimizations, which is something we'll touch on later on in the presentation. So with that, it's really beneficial to make sure you have the targeting right from day one when setting up a campaign. So let's see what we would recommend for a web targeting campaign. Make sure that you have the correct environment type on. And also we recommend using ads.txt. Ads.txt is a AIB text file, which was created with the aim to prevent unauthorized buying of inventory. And so this is just a really easy, cost-free way of minimizing fraud. There's lots of different devices available in the UI to target, and so make sure that you narrow down to the ones relevant to the web environment, which is desktop, mobile, and tablet. And finally, something in Beeswax, under segment, there's the option to include user ID present. This is another way of minimizing fraud because we know that a user ID is there, and also it's really beneficial for attribution and conversion discrepancies. Moving over to app, very, very similar app environment. Ads.txt doesn't apply here, but something that myself and the team have found a minimal gain, but it definitely cuts out a little bit of spend wastage, is excluding 2G and Ethernet. The reasoning here is modern apps tend to need a much faster connection to function, and so the performance on these, albeit low scale, tend to not be that strong. Mobile and tablet are the sort of main device types for the app environment, and then again, user ID present. So just some key tips when you get started. Moving on, we all know that creative is really key in driving those performance results, whether that's the messaging that you have on the creative, the visual of the creative, or the creative size. And so when it comes to creative size, our recommendation is when starting new activity, try lots of, like a variety of creative sizes. The reasoning here is that performance does differ by creative size. So by starting with a variety at the beginning of your campaign, collecting the data, and then narrowing down your targeting to those creative sizes which work for your brand will really help with performance. If you do need any advice as to which creative sizes you should consider targeting, please feel free to reach out to your account manager. They're always there to help recommend creative sizes. So creative weights in the UI, we're just going to use a really simple example here of two creatives. And over time, you've collected data next to these two creatives. They're both serving and gathering conversion data. So you don't necessarily want to totally exclude that 160 by 600 creative. Even though it is a higher CPA, it's still driving a good proportion of your conversions. And so what you may want to do is you may want to favor one creative over another. And this can be done by creative weights. On the overview campaign, on the line item, on the overview page, you can toggle between random and weighted. And if you toggle to weighted and navigate to your creative page, you'll then find that a new column arises with the ability to input weights. Best practice with creative weights is to make them add up to 100, but it's not essential because these weights will be normalized into a percentage. So let's have a look as to what these weights would do in terms of expected delivery. So the weights are normalized, so it takes the weight and then it divides it by the total of the weights inputted on that line item. So in this case, it'd be 60. So we would expect 33% to go towards the 160 by 600 and 66% to go towards the 300 by 250. Another thing we always look at is basic exclusion lists. Simply here, you want to stop buying what doesn't drive performance for your brand. And by doing this, you end up freeing up budget to push towards things that do work, but also you leave budget that you can then use to explore and prospect new inventory, which has the potential to drive performance. So I'm actually going to jump out the slides here and jump into the UI. So my screen now is showing MetaMarkets. MetaMarkets is a tool that's available to all our clients in the UI, and you'll find it in the tools drop-down MetaMarkets. This is a forecasting tool, and it allows you to work out of the traffic that's been sent to your bidder, what's the makeup of that traffic? What am I listening to? And so let's first take the site, the web environment. And a lot of people sort of think, let's look at domains. They're sort of the main thing on the web. But let's focus in on one domain and see what the makeup of this domain is. You can see that you can access it through multiple different inventory sources. And so by excluding a full domain, you may be actually sort of generalizing, and it could be that Rubicon has a different relationship to Google AdX, or they have different pockets of inventory for this domain. So let's focus now on an inventory source. You can now see that site ID is inventory specific. It has a prefix RP for Rubicon. And actually, there's multiple sections of Forbes for Rubicon. The makeup of these sections vary depending on the exchange. It could be that they work with different networks. It could be different sections of the website. And so it's actually more interesting to look at site ID as a metric rather than domain. It's a little bit more granular, and it allows you to sort of learn more about what works and what doesn't. So remember site ID. So let's also look at the app environment. Very similar to domain, but in the app world, it's called an app bundle. And these are, let's choose one example, these are not inventory specific. So you can access this app bundle through multiple different exchanges. But if we look at Index Exchange, again, app ID, there's multiple app IDs under this app bundle. So it's actually better, again, to look at app ID. One thing to note is that in the app world, Google AdX behaves a little differently. And they don't actually pass back site ID. They pass back a placeholder in the site ID field. So unfortunately, you can't optimize by site ID, app ID for Google AdX. So in this case, it would be app bundle that you need to look at. And the easiest way here is breaking it out into a separate line item and looking at app bundle for Google AdX. Great. So now we've sort of understood the makeup of the inventory world. Let's just summarize what we learned there. So for the web environment, I'm not saying never exclude domains, that's definitely not the advice here, but maybe avoid domains unless you are so confident that they just don't work for your brand. So look at the site ID. For app, it's best to look at app bundle when you're working with AdX, and app ID for all other exchanges. What we do recommend is creating these in the form of a list, and you can create a list in the UI and exclude it on the line item. By creating a list, it's excluded on the line item, and then you can just regularly update these lists as you gather more data and determine what is good and what is bad. And I mean, what you should exclude exactly is totally dependent on your goal and your KPI. But the top tip here is when you are looking at the data, pulling the field and your performance metrics, always order your data by the metric that's going to have the biggest impact on your KPI. So for a CPA campaign, this is a calculation of spend and conversion. So order by spend. For a CTR campaign, this is a calculation of impressions, so order by impressions. So you're always excluding items that are going to make the biggest impact to your brand. So a bid modifier. A bid modifier is a really easily accessible feature in the Beeswax UI. I'm going to quickly jump in again to the UI. This is the view of the line item, and just show you where the bid modifier lives. So on the overview page, you have your CPM strategy. Bid modifiers, to note, only work when you're using CPM strategies, because this is modifying your CPM. So whatever you input as your CPM bid, your modifier is going to take that CPM bid and it's going to modify it by whatever you input. So there's a bid modifier tab, and something that I find really useful in the Beeswax platform is that you can either choose an existing bid modifier or you can create a new one directly within your line item, and it just enables you to have a really smooth setup process. So you need to name your modifier, and then you can add any sort of targeting field against your modifier and simply add in your modifier value. Just to note, there's also this max bid field. It means that you can put a cap to almost like a safety net, just to prevent yourself from massively overbidding if you have multiple modifiers on one line. Also, there's the option to create it outside the line item. In the trafficking dropdown, there's modifiers, and you can simply create a modifier outside of the line item and assign it to multiple line items. Again, naming your modifier and just selecting modifier and simply creating it in the same way as you would if you were in the line item. Great. So now we know how to make a bid modifier. We kind of want to know what should we put in this bid modifier. So a couple of things that we found really useful. First of all is auction types. So there's two different types of auction types in programmatic, and let's have a quick recap as to what they are. So everything happens in the open exchange, and we're wanting to bid on this particular user. Three advertisers might be bidding all on the same user, all bidding differently. Second price auction will be when advertiser 2, in this case, with the highest bid, will pay 1 cent more than advertiser 1 with the second highest bid. And that's a second price auction. So you're not necessarily always paying what you input as your CPM bid. More recently, first price auctions have become a lot more common, and this is where you pay that full $2.50 of what you bid. And so now you're paying slightly more than you were before in the second price auction world. So you could use a bid modifier to modify down your CPM bid every time first price auction was present in that bid request. We tend to recommend somewhere in the region of 0.8, 0.9, depending on what your CPM bid is. So that's one way. Second way is creative sizes. So there's two sort of approaches here. We all know that CPMs vary by creative sizes. 970 by 250 is going to naturally be more expensive than a 300 by 250 just purely because of the size of the creative. And so you can either break out your line items and target different creative sizes on different line items, or you can keep it simple and use bid modifiers to modify that bid against different creative sizes on that line item. So one way of working out what you should modify your bid by is using the bid performance report in our query tool. The bid performance report allows you to look at your win rate. So that's out of the bids you've submitted to the exchange, how many of those have I won and served an impression? And so by pulling this, you can filter by creative ID, and then I would advise you also filter by line item and campaigns. And you may see, not all the time, depends what the data is showing, but you may see that some creatives have lower win rates, and a reasoning behind this could be that you're simply not bidding enough for that creative size. So you can look to use bid modifiers to bid up or down depending on the creative size on that line item. So they're two very specific cases, but I can imagine a lot of you are thinking, well, I can use a bid modifier against all sorts of targeting fields. So you can use it against time of day, city, country, device type, device model, and the list continues. So we've come up with one calculation of how to calculate a modifier value when running a CPA campaign. And it's as follows. So the first step, just to note again, this is for CPA campaigns, so cost per acquisition. The first step is to find your optimal CPM bid. So you do this with the following calculation. That's your KPI target, so your goal, times by your conversion rate, which is the number of impressions you're serving to win a conversion, times by 1,000. And sort of that's not really self-intuitive. We want to sort of break that down and sort of see what is it, why does that even get the optimal CPM bid? Well, your KPI target is your spend divided by your conversions, that's your CPA. Your conversion rate is your conversions divided by your impressions. So if you cancel out the conversions, you're left with a very familiar calculation of CPM, which is spend divided by impressions times by 1,000. That's your cost per 1,000 impressions. And that is the CPM that you should look to bid based on the conversion rate against that targeting field and the target that you would like to achieve. So now that you have that, you can use that to calculate your modifier. So the modifier calculation will be your optimal bid, which you found in step 1, divided by your average bid price that you're bidding currently against that targeting field. And it's a nice way of calculating modifiers against multiple targeting fields. So that's all we have time for today. They're just like a couple of simple ways. Of course, there are tons and tons of different optimization methods, and this is just skimming the surface. But as a team at Beeswax, we are here to sort of help you guys and advise on any questions. So I've just put my email on this slide. It's hannah@beeswax.com for any questions in the future. But for now, I will pass back to Paul, who can take some questions right now.
Yeah. Thank you, Hannah. That was wonderful. I definitely learned a lot from it that I didn't already know. So let's dive into questions. We do have quite a few here. So first question, if we have campaigns that are focusing on impression delivery and frequency, should we still break out mobile app and web into separate line items?
It depends. I think that still, it depends kind of like what you want to achieve. If you want to simply just serve the campaign and you're not too interested in sort of like the breakdown of what you're serving them on, you can, I'm not saying you can't target them on the same line item. Sometimes it's easier to keep it all in one. But if you are looking to do conversion tracking or sort of optimizations against app bundle, app ID, site ID, it is a lot easier to have it broken out. But it totally depends. It's personal preference. If it's working for you and it's on the same line item, keep it on the same line item. We personally prefer to sort of break it out just for the visibility between the different environments.
Okay, thank you. Next question. What is the difference between a domain and a site ID? Is it a subset of the domain?
So the actual makeup is not fully transparent to the DSP side. We just have to interpret the data that we see. I believe that all exchanges sort of work in very different ways. Some have different methods. So we don't actually fully know the meaning of it. We just know that it's a little bit more granular. It's exchange specific, and multiple site IDs nest under one domain. And so we just know that we can have more control when using site ID or app ID compared to domain and app bundle.
Okay. Next question. Do you adjust your QPS filters based on insights you are finding in your campaign optimizations?
Absolutely. If you feel like you're not being sent enough of the right traffic, or you want to listen to more according to the data that you're gathering and the trends that you're seeing, I would definitely look to talk to your account manager to manipulate the QPS templates that are being sent to your bidder. For example, if you see that one domain is driving fantastic performance, or a bunch of app IDs, and you're not potentially listening to 100% of the traffic, reach out to your account manager, and if you have the flexibility, definitely ask them to toggle the traffic so you're maximizing the potential of that subset of traffic. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Next question came in through the chat. Let me just load that up real quick. Would you also recommend day parting as an effective way to optimize for CTR?
I always think day parting is a very good optimization by simply narrowing down the times that you're delivering will definitely help. It depends on the trends. If you are seeing that clicks aren't coming during evening hours or overnight, I would definitely recommend looking to either exclude times or increase bids via bid modifiers against times that potentially drive higher CTRs. But I would always recommend looking at day part targeting.
Okay. And our last question, unless folks, you have one more chance to submit a question using the Q&A feature. Can we validate the invalid clicks?
Can you repeat that question?
So there's a typo in it. It says, "Can we validating the invalid clicks?" But I hope I think I know what it's referring to. How does one validate invalid clicks? Was that a part that you got into?
I don't think we covered that in the webinar. I think we can look at invalid and valid clicks at Beeswax. It's something that I haven't sort of taken a deep dive into, but it's something I'm very willing to investigate after the webinar. So please feel free to drop me an email with a bit more context to sort of what the ask is here, and we can definitely get the information over to you.
Okay, wonderful. So thank you, Hannah. I really appreciate you taking us through this and answering all these questions. And I want to thank all of you for tuning in and learning about basic optimization tactics and just attending our 15 minutes sessions in general. They've been a great way for us to communicate some of the different value of the features and benefits that we have in our product. So I hope that everybody's staying safe, staying healthy, and we will see you next time for our next 15 minutes with Beeswax. Have a great day.